Imagine sitting down at a table somewhere in Nova Scotia, and in front of you is a dish that looks simple, golden on top, dense underneath, steaming hot from the oven. You take one bite, and suddenly you're tasting 300 years of history. That's what Rappai Pai does to you. That's what food can do when it carries the soul of an entire people inside it. So here's a question worth asking before we even begin. How many dishes do you know that were born out of survival, passed down through generations, and still end up on family tables today, almost exactly the way they were made centuries ago? Not many, but Rappai Pai is one of them, and the story behind it is as rich and layered as the dish itself. Let's start at the very beginning. The Acadian people, French settlers who made their homes in what is now eastern Canada, particularly Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island, faced one of the most heartbreaking chapters in North American history. They were forcibly expelled from their homeland in the mid-1700s in an event known as the Grand Arrangement, or the Great Expulsion. Thousands of families were torn apart, displaced, scattered across continents. And yet, through all of that, the Acadian people held on to their culture, their language, their traditions, and yes, their food. When they returned and rebuilt their communities, the kitchen became one of the most powerful spaces of identity and resistance. Rappai Pai came directly out of that spirit. Now, what exactly is Rappai Pai? At its core, it's a baked potato casserole, but calling it just that would be like calling a symphony just noise. The name itself comes from the French word raper, which means to grate. And grating is indeed the essential act that makes this dish unlike anything else. You start with raw potatoes, and we're talking a lot of potatoes. You grate them very finely, and then here's the part that surprises most people. You squeeze all the liquid out. Every last drop. You use cloth. You use pressure. You press until the potato pulp is as dry as you can possibly get it. What you're left with is this starchy, almost powdery mound of raw potato that on its own looks completely unassuming. But then comes the transformation. You take hot broth, traditionally chicken broth, though pork and clam versions are equally beloved depending on the region and the family, and you pour it into that dry potato pulp. And something almost magical happens. The hot liquid is absorbed instantly, partially cooking the starch, transforming the mixture into something dense and sticky and deeply savory. This is the base of Rappai Pai, and right here you can already tell that this is not your average potato dish. Have you ever eaten something and felt like the texture was almost as important as the flavor? That's exactly the experience Rappai Pai gives you. Once it's baked, and baking takes a full 2 hours, low and slow, the texture becomes unlike anything most people have ever encountered in a potato dish. It's dense, slightly gelatinous, almost bouncy. The top crust turns golden and develops a thin, crispy layer that gives way to the soft, chewy interior underneath. People who try it for the first time often don't quite know what to make of it. It's not fluffy like mashed potatoes. It's not crisp like a roasted potato. It's something entirely its own. Underneath all of that potato, layered into the center of the dish, is the meat. Chicken is the most classic choice. Often a whole chicken, stewed until tender, the meat pulled apart and laid into the baking dish before the potato mixture is poured over the top. Some families use salt pork, adding a smokier, fattier richness to the whole thing. Coastal communities in Clare and Digby in Nova Scotia are especially known for their clam versions, where fresh clams are tucked inside, giving the dish a briny, oceanic character that's completely different from the inland versions. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this recipe. It adapts. Every family makes it a little differently. Every community has its own version. Here's a question that gets to the heart of why food culture matters. When a recipe changes slightly from village to village, from grandmother to grandmother, does it lose authenticity or does it gain it? With Rappai Pai, the answer is clear. Those variations aren't impurities. They're proof that the dish is alive. They're evidence that people have been making it, adjusting it, owning it for generations. Now let's talk about how it's eaten, because that's just as culturally interesting as how it's made. Most Acadians will tell you that Rappai Pai is traditionally served with butter melted on top, letting it soak into the dense potato. Salt and pepper, of course. But then there are the pairings that might surprise an outsider. Pickles, ketchup, even molasses in some traditional households. These aren't strange additions when you understand the Acadian palate, which is always balanced savory and sweet, rich and acidic, heavy and bright. The pickles in particular cut through the richness of the broth-soaked potato in a way that makes the whole dish come alive. Rappai pie is also deeply tied to community. This is not a dish you make on a Tuesday night when you're tired. Making rappai pie is an event. Historically, Acadian families would gather to grate enormous quantities of potatoes together, taking turns at the work, talking, singing, passing the time. The physical effort of making it, and it does require real effort, became an occasion for connection. Even today, rappai pie is associated with festivals, church suppers, family reunions, and community gatherings. In the Clare region of Nova Scotia, you can find restaurants and local halls that serve it on weekends, and people line up for it. It's comfort food in the deepest sense of that word. Not just comfortable to eat, but connected to a feeling of belonging. Think about this for a moment. In an age where food trends move at the speed of social media, where fusion and innovation are celebrated above almost everything else, what does it mean that a dish invented in the 1700s with almost no variation in its basic technique is still being made and eaten and loved? What does it say about the people who kept it alive through displacement, poverty, cultural pressure, and the relentless march of modernization? It says everything. It says that food is memory. It says that a recipe is not just a list of ingredients and steps. It's a document. It's an act of preservation. Every time an Acadian family sits down to a pan of rappai pie, they're in conversation with their ancestors. They're saying, we're still here, we still know who we are, and this dense, golden, savory, extraordinary thing is part of what makes us us. So the next time someone tells you that traditional food is old-fashioned, or that we should always be looking for something newer, something more sophisticated, something more modern, think about rappai pie. Think about those Acadian cooks in the 1700s, grating potatoes by hand, squeezing out the liquid, pouring in hot broth, sliding a heavy pan into a wood-fired oven. Think about how that exact same process is still happening today, in kitchens across Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and in Acadian communities around the world. Some things don't need to be reinvented. Some things just need to be remembered. And rappai pie is proof that the most meaningful food on earth isn't always the most glamorous. It's the kind that carries an entire people's heart inside every single bite.